Have you ever felt like your anxious tendencies have cost you relationships? Your intentions were good, but something went terribly off the tracks and it got to a pressure point where no matter how cool your words were, you couldn't hide your nervous energy. And looking back, you just know it had to have been so unattractive. I think in this digital time, a lot of anxious blunders come in the form of texting mistakes, and some of them are really obvious. Text blasting, double texting. But what about texting someone the day after the date simply to tell them you had a good time? I mean, that's harmless, right? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I said that I had created a personal boundary where I was no longer reaching out and initiating texting men the day after the first date. And so many viewers expressed how this boundary triggered them, and I totally get it. Because I also took the time to write it down and draw a boundary around it. But as you get older, hyper-focusing on one action or one text is not going to protect you from sadness. And although it became a boundary for me, I'd like to talk more about it because there is so much more going on than just that one text message. And once you see it, you will be less vulnerable to being jerked around in dating. So if you are ready to learn how one text can say so much and yet mean absolutely nothing at all, then grab that bottle of nail polish because we are going to talk about it right now. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about how the best way to spot someone who will not be good for you is to pay attention to the behavioral patterns that they bring out in you. I mentioned how I sat down and made a physical list of all of the behaviors that I was displaying in all of my relationships that never worked out. And one of the items on that very long list was I was always the one to reach out and initiate a text with a gentleman the day after the first date, just to thank him or tell him I had a good time. I was excited about him and I wanted to express my interest. And in an attempt to improve my relationships and mainly my gauge on how interested people actually were in me, I began to omit the actions off of this list, including I stopped texting gentlemen the day after the date. Well, it became clear that people were so triggered by this one day after the date text. And I had a commenter get upset at me because when I said that I stopped texting the day after the first date, he said I was the red flag because by omitting that text, I was not reciprocating. Well, that commenter was not wrong. I was not reciprocating. I was doing everything. As I got older, and especially after each rejection, I was becoming more and more anxious, and I started closing the gaps faster and faster. I never allowed the other person any space to show any of their own self-motivated interest to be with me. They didn't have to. I was doing all of the work for them. I was finding them. I was initiating the first reach out. I was asking them on the first date. I was initiating the first hug, the first physical contact. I was initiating the day after the date text. I was initiating asking them on a second date. And then after they rejected me, I continued to initiate contact with them to try to change their mind, which is the death knell of respect. And if you think about it, maybe this one text would have never mattered if all this other stuff was not going on. So when I took this one thing off of the table, it was part of an elimination diet. Allow me to explain. You know how when something that you are doing is making you sick, maybe something you're eating, you go on an elimination diet to figure out the main problem. People do carnivore diets to relearn hunger cues because they are barraging themselves with so much sugar all the time, they can no longer tell which food craving they're having is actual hunger. They have to totally relearn their hunger cues. So for me, filtering out the day after text at that time in my life was just one part of an elimination diet. I had to write down all of my patterns in relationships that weren't working. And I had to back off completely in order to reintroduce things and relearn interest cues that were coming from outside of me. I was so focused on my interest in them. I wasn't taking their interest level into consideration. People don't care how much you like them. They care how much they like you. I was letting anxious triggers dictate my life, and I was going against my gut that was trying to give me genuine cues, telling me, stop texting these guys the day after the date because I should have never gone out on the first date with them in the first place. They had already showed me before we ever got to that first date, before that first text, that they weren't really interested. I was pushing, and I had to back off to allow the people who were truly uninterested to fade out. I talked about my boundaries and my patterns, and maybe they don't exactly custom fit to you, and they shouldn't, because we're two different people. We carry different baggage. It's all about reflecting on behavior that hasn't worked for you, and try something different. Try the opposite. Why not? I did. I got to the point where I tried something different because I felt like I had nothing to lose. But even though we are different, I do feel like a lot of us on this channel resonate with each other, and we understand a very specific pain of feeling like we didn't mean enough to people in times where we should have gotten that validation. And the reason why I talk sometimes with so much conviction is because I feel like people who watch this channel have not been given the credit for being themselves. You're underappreciated and overlooked at times in your life where someone significant should have helped you feel seen. And we make the mistake of knowing this pain and meeting people and connecting with their pain and then thinking, oh no, I care about this person. I don't want them to ever feel the pain I did. I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to heal them. I'm going to try to solve their problems. I'm going to try to fix everything for them. If you want to surround yourself with healthier people, you have to practice connecting through things that are more positive and save the trauma talk for more appropriate times, after you have taken measured steps to figure out if they are a safe person. And you could argue that I'm doing the exact opposite of what I'm preaching right now. I'm connecting with you, people that I first meet through pain, and then I'm trying to help with it. But here's the difference. We are not currently playing footsie with each other underneath the table at Olive Garden. We're not at Olive Garden. This is a platform where we talk about trauma and breakups. I'm putting myself out there to a general audience in an appropriate setting for trauma dumping. And the people who connect with it can stay. And the people who don't, they click away. And it's incredibly honest. And I don't take it personally, because the people who do stay, you guys are the right group for me, and I'm grateful that we found each other. And that's one big way my attitude changed with meeting people like in a romantic sense and friendships in that kind of arena. I'm just going to place myself here, and the people who enjoy me will stay, and the people who don't, well, they'll click away. They'll see themselves out. And I don't take it personally. Now, that does not mean that getting ghosted by a guy I was really interested in after a couple of dates did not hurt my feelings, because it did. I remember what that feels like. It didn't mean I didn't have a couple of days or a week where I was bummed out, but it was still better. It was easier emotionally, because at least I was learning to take things at face value and I wasn't over-investing. Sir, we had one date. I'm not going to text you every single day. I still don't know you very well. Hey, we've only had 3 dates. I'm not going to sleep with you. I don't know if you're safe. I don't know you very well. Or we've only known each other for a month. I'm not going to disclose to you every single trauma I've ever had and then expect you to make me feel better about it. I don't know if you're safe. I do not know you very well. And having this attitude sure didn't stop guys from ditching me. I mean, it's still dating. But I had a lot more luck, because I don't think any man ever thought it was attractive whenever I was trying to pretend to be someone I thought they wanted me to be in order to get another date with them. Because whether you're a man or a woman who's into men or women, desperation is never a good look. Well, welcome to the other half, where we know attraction is not just about looks. We also need to take care of the inner half. Because we can't just look at one side of things. We have to look at the whole picture. And sure, maybe one text message does seem very important right now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just one small pattern that you notice in a slew of other patterns that came long before that one. Red flag patterns that maybe you decided to either ignore or you just haven't had enough dating experience to realize that they are red flags. And in writing this video, I thought about how in my 20s, because like I said, as I got older, I got more and more anxious and I started closing the gaps more. But when I was a little bit younger and in my 20s, I did have a couple of guys who initiated texting me the day after the first date, and they told me they had a great time and they wanted to see me again, and then they spent the entire next 2 years of their life making me miserable with fearful avoidant games, reeling me in and then pushing me away. So yeah, I guess they texted me. Yay! Big picture, they started to jerk me around and intermittently ignore my texts whenever they felt like it, and personally, upon reflection, I think anyone who makes a habit of ignoring you, that's a much bigger deal breaker than the speed of which they did or did not send one text the very next day. All relationships begin differently. One text and one day is only one part of a bigger picture. I wanted you to write down patterns of your behaviors in relationships that didn't work because I want to help you get to the bottom of recognizing people who are going to jerk you around faster, so you can find someone who is serious about a relationship with you. Writing down my elimination diet micro patterns clearly showed the macro problem. It wasn't what I said or didn't say immediately after the first date. The big picture was I was the only one trying to keep the relationships going. I had no idea how to do the hardest thing, which was listen to my gut, cut my losses, and move on. These are my experiences and my baggage. Yours is all going to be different. My message is to slow down and take the time you need to learn yourself and show up for yourself. One of the biggest things you can do to help yourself in dating and in all relationship dynamics of your life is show up for your commitments. Because when you show up for dates, or lunch with friends, or business meetings, you teach yourself that people are capable of showing up. Showing up is an active choice, and that knowledge helps you filter out the people who won't. Whenever you get involved with someone who feels like they get to decide when you do and do not exist, for me, my boundaries at this point in my life sounds like an absolute deal breaker. I had someone in the comments last week point out to me, they said, "Hey Maria, you gotta cool it with these absolutes. You don't know everything." And you're right, I don't. If I had all the answers, I wouldn't have any reason to get out of bed in the morning. But I do have 3 unwavering absolutes in my life. I absolutely took the time to pause, paint my nails, and reflect on mistakes that I have made in my relationships, and I still do that. I absolutely would give any of the advice in any of my videos to my own daughter, whom I absolutely love more than anyone on the planet, which means I want her to have such a good time in life, but I also want her to protect herself. And I want the same thing for you, because that's security. You securely go out and you have more fun in dating, and you also protect yourself by not crashing through other people's boundaries, and also by not allowing people to steamroll over yours. Your value is real, and even though, no, we are not actually at the Olive Garden, I still think you are worth one pretty penny. I'll put the original video that talked about boundaries I created to reveal red flags right here. My name is Maria Adriana. You did not have to live my life, but I certainly hope you can learn something from it. As always, thank you for visiting the other half.